Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cleveland. My name is John DePaula, Vice President and Group Publisher for the Penn Media Manufacturing and Supply Chain Group. I want to welcome you to the 2010 Industry Week Best Plans Conference. This year's conference has 3 keynote speakers, 2 general sessions, 28 breakout sessions, 12 plant tours, the Best Plants Awards ceremony, and this evening I hope to see you at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame networking reception. It's going to be a great time. Just a few housekeeping notes. Don't forget to visit Solutions Hall in between sessions to talk to our exhibitors and sponsors. Food and beverages will be available throughout the day, and Solutions Hall is located behind the double doors just behind you. The Speakers Lounge will be open after each session if you'd like to ask additional questions or engage in further discussions with our speakers. It's located down the hall on the right in the George Bush room here on the 3rd floor. There have been a couple changes to the conference program, and we'd like to mention them to you right now. The Tuesday morning 10 to 11 o'clock session, Energy and Plant Operations Management at the Valero Energy Corporation, has been canceled and replaced with the Lean Accounting Concepts presented by Ton Limbruno with the Parker Hannifin Corporation. Additionally, Mr. Keith Sultana is stuck in Europe, and we certainly wish him a safe return home. The Ingersoll Rand session, Gap to Excellence Transformation, will still be presented by Mr. Rick Ryan. I now would like to take the opportunity to thank our 2010 Best Plants sponsors. Without them, we just couldn't have the great event that we have. Our title sponsor is TBM Consulting Group. Our plant tour sponsor is Advanced Technology Services. Our special events sponsor is Siemens PLM. The Solutions Hall sponsor is New Equipment Digest Magazine and the Penn Media Manufacturing and Supply Chain Group. Our track sponsor is Performance Improvement LLC. Track sponsor Kronos. Track and lanyard sponsor SAP. Track sponsor Tooling U. Our continuous brake sponsor is Infor. Our buffet breakfast and lunches sponsor is Kronos. And our portable presentations sponsor is Lean Learning Center. I'd also like to thank our plant tour hosts, and hopefully many of you were able to enjoy some of the plant tours yesterday. Alcoa Cleveland Works, the Ford Cleveland Engine Plant number 1, Juergens, Lincoln Electric Machine Division, Lincoln Electric Consumables Division, Swagelok, and the Timken Company. Also, I must thank all of those who have worked so hard to make sure that this year's Best Plants Conference leaves you with ideas and best practices that will allow you to continue on your journey to operational excellence. I also want to thank Steve Minner, our content director, and his team for putting together a really great program and a lineup of really world-class manufacturing leaders who will be speaking to you during the next few days. I also want to thank our events director, Erica Bailey, and her team for coordinating all the logistics and every little detail that goes into an event like this. There's just an incredible amount of work that goes into Best Plants, Erica. We thank you very much. You know, every year Best Plants moves to a different city. Next year, we will be in Atlanta. But this year, it's really special. We're in Cleveland, my hometown and the hometown of all the people responsible for producing Industry Week magazine and the Best Plants Conference. Cleveland is also a city that has a long and strong history of manufacturing success and innovation, and lately there's been a lot of excitement in Cleveland, especially in the area of biomedical engineering and green manufacturing that are fueling ideas for local manufacturers to design and build products and to get these products into the supply chain. Cleveland is getting it done. And at this time, I'd like to introduce a very special guest. Please help me give a warm welcome to Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson.
Thank you, thank you. Good morning. And how are you this morning? Are you? It is early. Well, I want to welcome you to the Industry Week Best Plant Conference and welcome you to Cleveland. As was mentioned, Cleveland has a long history of manufacturing, and we have a great workforce, which is essential to manufacturing. And we also are looking at moving into the future. I want to put Cleveland where the world is going, not where it is now. And when we do that and we look into the future with biotechnology, that was mentioned, a sustainable economy and innovation, manufacturing is going to be a key to that. And being efficient, not only in the private sector, but the public sector, and how we do business and how we interact with each other is going to be important, not only for Cleveland, but all major urban centers throughout this country, if we're going to restore ourselves to an economy that is growing, productive, and employs people. So again, welcome to Cleveland, and hope you enjoy yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And another big boost to Cleveland will be when the Cavs win the World Championship. I think everyone will hopefully agree to that. So far, so good. Before I introduce our first speaker of the day, we ask that you please turn off your cell phones and avoid any interruptions during the presentation. Our featured keynote speaker this morning is John Ferriola. John graduated from the Maritime Academy, State University of New York, with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. He began his career with Bethlehem Steel Corporation in 1974 and worked in various operating and management roles. He joined Nucor Corporation in 1991 as manager of maintenance and engineering at the Jewett, Texas bar mill. In 1998, he was named vice president and general manager of the Crawfordsville, Indiana sheet mill, and in 2002, John was appointed to executive vice president. His current position at Nucor is chief operating officer of steel making operations. Please help me welcome John Ferriola to the stage.
Good morning. How's everyone doing this morning? Boy, that didn't sound really encouraging. It's always tough when you're the first speaker and you begin at 7:30 in the morning. So I'll do my best to keep you awake. Let me start by thanking John for that generous introduction and to say it's great to be here this morning, especially given this conference's focus on continuous improvement. Working tirelessly to be innovators and leaders in the steel industry is what we at Nucor do. All 20,000 plus of our family members located in 14 different countries. We believe that this sort of focus on continuous improvement is important for the entire industry, the entire manufacturing industry. But staying focused on improving is very difficult today. It's very difficult when your company is struggling to stay afloat. When economic conditions turn down, planning how you build for a better future may seem like the last thing you should have on your mind. But we believe that these difficult times are the most important times to envision what we want tomorrow to be and to enact a plan to make sure that we all get there. At Nucor, we are not only working to be ready for the revitalized global economy, but we are aggressively and fearlessly taking the steps necessary to get there. When I think of someone who embodies this spirit, the person who comes to my mind is one of America's most iconic action heroes, John Wayne, who was recently voted third on a list of America's favorite film stars.
There's right and there's wrong. You got to do one or the other. You do the one and you're living. You do the other and you may be walking around, but you're dead as a beaver hat.
Now, I'm not sure if that audio played for you, okay? Was everyone able to hear that? No, okay. Well, then let me recap what he said. He was talking about how important it is to stay focused on your goals in life and how no matter what happens to you early in life, you should stay focused and committed to your long-term goals. And why that's important is when you think about John Wayne's career, what many of us may not remember or may not know is that his first starring role was in a film titled The Big Trail. Now, you probably haven't heard of that film because it was a huge flop. And this setback almost ended John Wayne's career. For most of the next decade, he received nothing more than a series of minor roles. In fact, in one film, he was cast as a corpse. 9 years after his first starring role in that huge flop, Wayne had his breakout part in Stagecoach, which propelled him into major stardom. He would go on to make over 90 films and win dozens of awards, including the famed Academy Award for Best Actor. Therefore, it seems appropriate to me that Mr. Wayne be our guide today in saddling up to face this exciting yet very challenging time for all of us in this room. I want to take a few moments to share with you Nucor's understanding of where we are, what the next several years of recovery will bring, and how all of us can work together to restore our place in the world as a nation that builds and makes things in the future. So first, let's start with where are we today? Where do we stand at the end of the first quarter of 2010? I think we all have to agree that the last couple of years are living up to the name being given to them, the Great Recession, the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. As John Wayne said, the fire is not discriminating. It burns anything in its path for whatever reason. And I believe all of us in this room today have felt the flames of that fire. Globally, world GDP, which had been growing at about 5% in 2007, slowed in 2008 and dropped dramatically in 2009. World trade volume, which increased by 7% in 2007, was down an astonishing 14.4% in 2009. Across the U.S., we saw the impact of this global crisis ripple throughout our economy. So far, we have seen over 8.4 million jobs lost in this recession. 8.4 million people out of work since the beginning of this recession, with over a quarter of those coming out of the manufacturing sector. Job losses have been more severe than in any recession in recent years. In fact, each recession has brought harder downturns and longer, slower recovery times. So why is that? What has changed? We believe it is the direct result of the loss of manufacturing jobs in America. From June of 1998 to March of 2010, more than a third of all manufacturing jobs in America were lost. A third of jobs lost in manufacturing. And that's over 6 million jobs in a short 10-year span. To further put this in perspective, American manufacturing jobs are at their lowest point in nearly 70 years. And this situation is critical because every manufacturing job supports an additional 5.2 jobs through increased wages, infrastructure investments, and taxes. And because manufacturing jobs typically pay 50% more than equivalent jobs in retail, these jobs lost cannot be replaced by a service economy. So when manufacturing jobs disappear, we see those losses multiplied throughout our economy. We can see it evidenced in today's unemployment rate. The government reports an official unemployment rate that was 9.7% in the month of March. 9.7% official unemployment. This itself is historically high, being exceeded only briefly by an unemployment rate during the 1981 recession. And if you'll recall, we were sitting at about 4.5% unemployment in 2007. So the increase is by far the largest spike in unemployment in over 40 years. But our situation is even worse than the official classification numbers capture. The government also releases what they call a comprehensive measure of unemployment, or what we call real unemployment. Real unemployment includes those individuals who used to work full-time but now can only find part-time employment. And it includes those individuals who have stopped looking for work because they've simply given up. They haven't been able to find a job, so they give up looking, and somehow they're no longer counted among the unemployed. When these people are factored in, the real unemployment rate for March was almost 17%. 17% real unemployment. Our country's unemployment number will continue to rise if we do not restore strength to our manufacturing sector here in America. Now, we are seeing some small signs of hope. We've seen a slight uptick in the capacity utilization in the last 6 months. But we're climbing back from the lowest point in capacity utilization since the 1940s. The 1940s. Clearly, we have our work cut out for us. As I've spoken across the country, I've encountered rooms full of people who are working hard to keep their businesses running in the face of this economic crisis. I believe these people epitomize what John Wayne meant when he said, "Courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway." I believe that most of us here have saddled up and are riding hard into the future. So what does our future look like? What can we expect from the recovery? Well, frankly, it's not great news. But if we face it and work towards improving our positions for the future, we can make something good out of this. Most analysts and policymakers think we're in for a long, slow recovery. And we're starting to see some early signs that they're probably correct. As we looked at earlier, global GDP ended 2009 with negative growth. This year and next, we are forecasted to see a growth of about 4% each year, as compared to the 5 to 8% growth we would expect to see in a full recovery. Overall, the U.S. GDP is expected to improve moving forward. 2009 ended with the largest decline in American GDP in 30 years. However, 2010 and 2011 are currently expected to get back on track with moderate growth. We see this trend in specific industries also. American steel output, as compared with the last few years, has decreased significantly from the third quarter of 2008 through today, even though we've seen a small rebound starting in the latter part of 2009 and continuing through the first quarter of 2010. Non-residential construction is expected to remain very weak, hovering around the 2009 levels and showing only a slow recovery over the next couple of years. A return to near-normal automotive sales is not expected until at least 2012, after a drop of over one-third from 2007 to 2009. Auto sales declined 33% in the two-year period. All of these industries and many others are showing signs of life, but we have a long way to go before we get back to something approaching what we call normal. And that said, we don't believe that we will see the kind of credit-fueled demand we saw in the past decade anytime soon. While we believe that ultimately the problems with the financial system will be resolved and credit will once again begin to flow, we believe that our nation is transitioning from a debt-driven economy to a savings-driven economy. Consumers will be using less debt, and end-use demand will be determined by what they can afford as opposed to what they can borrow. This reduction in end-use demand will put pressure on all of our industries to maintain a balance between supply and demand. Now, this may seem like a bad thing. I mean, let's be real. We all enjoyed the market created by credit on steroids. But now we've experienced the hangover, and it is clear that highly leveraged demand is not a sustainable model for economic growth. In light of the resulting state of the U.S. economy, it would not be surprising if there are more structural changes in the economy, including additional financial reforms, additional bankruptcies, mergers, and supply chain reconfiguration. I think the best we can say is that the future will be a time of great challenge. But I believe that great challenges present great opportunities for great companies. So perhaps the question we should be asking ourselves is not what the recovery will look like, but what it should look like. And what can we do to make it that way? As John Wayne said, tomorrow is the most important thing in life. It comes to us at midnight, very clean. It's perfect when it arrives, and it puts itself in our hands. It hopes that we have learned something from yesterday. So what should we have learned from yesterday? We should remember that the American economy is the world's economic engine and has historically pulled the world's economies out of negative trends. How have we done this? We've done it because the United States traditionally had the strongest manufacturing industry in the world. And manufacturing provides good jobs paying high wages, which increases demand for products across the world, driving the need for more supply and necessitating creating even more new jobs. And the cycle continues. Without the industries represented in this room, the global economy would be spiraling further into recession, frankly, heading towards depression. And we need to make sure that our voices are heard in our communities and in the halls of our governments, we need to make sure that we are keeping a focus on being a nation that makes and builds things. That is what we do. That is how we built this country. To do that, our top priority has to be creating jobs. We need over 18 to 20 million new jobs created to replace the jobs that have been lost in this recession, lost to the changes in manufacturing economy that have taken place over the last few years, and to keep up with our population growth. Last year's stimulus package is projected to merely create or save 3.5 million jobs, and that's by the end of next year. This is woefully short of what we and our country needs. There are 3 steps we can take to bring about job creation, and we need to take to bring about job creation. We need to achieve energy independence. We need to balance our trade deficit. And we need to rebuild our infrastructure for this century. First, we need to pursue a realistic plan to achieve energy independence. Renewable energy sources will be an important part of the energy mix going forward. But renewable energy is only part of the solution. The reality is that right now and for decades to come, only nuclear power, natural gas, and coal can provide energy on the scale required for our economy and our energy-intensive industries. We must recognize the current limitations of other energy sources and new technologies to meet our operational and economic needs. Unrealistic goals will drive up energy prices and decrease reliability, thereby compromising economic stability and growth. By ensuring our energy independence with a mix of resources, we will add a number of jobs in many ways. The construction of new energy infrastructure, the development and provision of energy to consumers, ensuring affordable energy for tomorrow's manufacturing employers. And it'll drive research and development into new energy technologies. Second, we need to provide a stable and level playing field for manufacturing in global markets. By doing this, we create the most efficient supply chain, fueling prosperity for the entire world. And that is why Nucor fights so hard for fair, free, but fair trade. And we need to remember that free trade does not mean free for all trade. There are rules that have been agreed to and adopted by the nations of the international trading community. Nucor's position is, and always has been, and always will be, that these rules must be enforced. Globalization is a good thing. It expands our markets, creates new trade relationships, and allows goods and raw materials to flow around the planet. But when governments ignore or deliberately break the rules by which we trade, by engaging in currency manipulation, employing illegal export subsidies, or intervening in commodity negotiations, then our businesses, your businesses, are forced to compete with entire nations. Our government must hold these parties accountable at the World Trade Organization and in our own World Trade Organization compliant trade agreements. If we don't, we are going to continue to run massive trade deficits with these nations. And these massive trade deficits are crippling to the American economy. They are destroying American manufacturing, and they are putting Americans out of work. Restoring a balance to trade will give American manufacturing the level playing field it needs to be the job engines of our economy. And having been 34 years in the manufacturing environment, I can guarantee you, given a level playing field, American manufacturing will succeed in global competition. Finally, we need to upgrade our conventional infrastructure. Out of $787 billion, $787 billion in the stimulus package, only $110 billion was allocated for infrastructure spending, up to a third of which is committed to renewable energy, which leaves about $70 billion, only $70 billion out of $787 billion for conventional infrastructure. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we need $2.2 trillion in spending over the next 5 years to repair and update our roads, our bridges, our dams, our rail service, and air traffic control systems, just to make America's infrastructure safe and to keep us globally competitive. Not only would this effort create jobs through the construction of this infrastructure in the coming years, but it would also provide the American economy with the basic foundation it must have to support manufacturers of the 21st century. We need our government to make creating jobs its number one priority. Number one priority, creating jobs. And we need our government not to be distracted with programs that detract from this effort by adding new deficits or increasing burdensome regulations. By achieving energy independence, restoring American manufacturing through leveling the trade playing field, and building America's 21st century infrastructure, we can create a more secure and prosperous economic future for our nation and for the world. It's up to those of us in this room to make sure that our representatives in the communities, states, nations where we live and work hear this message loud and clear. We have to take the fight to those who would make us compete with one hand tied behind our backs. American manufacturing is the backbone of our economy. We put people to work at good wages, making high-quality products that you can count on and that are safe to use. If America's elected leaders take care of their part of the bargain, we in the manufacturing sector will take care of our part of the bargain. The studios dismissed John Wayne's chances to be a major star after his first big budget flop. But he stayed focused on his goal, remained true to himself, and proved that he could come back from being a bit player. And once again, you're not hearing this, but what he's being asked in that little clip is, are you going to quit? And he responded, me? Quit? Never. A lot of people seem ready to write off American manufacturing as a relic of the 20th century. They point to green jobs or the knowledge economy as the future. But we're not going anywhere. We always have been, and we always will be, the key to economic success in America and in the world. And if we stay focused on making sure America understands the critical role manufacturing plays in our economy, we'll ride out of this downturn even stronger and more profitable than we went in. So I'm going to close by saying, let's saddle up, let's get it done, and let's do it together. Thank you. Okay, now we have some time for questions and answers. Questions?
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Very, very interesting talk. Thank you very much. You spent a little while talking about probably one of our biggest trading partners without mentioning them by name.
That might be China?
That might be China.
Okay, now I've mentioned them by name.
And as I'm sure you're aware, their currency is often in the news quite a bit recently as we've held off from the report on whether or not they're currency manipulators. And I'm curious what you think we as manufacturers and also what you think our leadership in Washington could and should be doing to perhaps reverse, I guess, what I would call the hollowing out of American manufacturing.
I'd be happy to comment on that. What we should be doing and what we need to do is to hold China accountable. The study on whether or not China has been a currency manipulator has been going on forever. And on July 15th, April 15th, they were finally going to announce the results of this year-long study. Clearly, it was going to be that China is, in fact, a currency manipulator. Many of our other trade partners around the world have already come to that conclusion. China approached the United States, as they always have, when they had nowhere else to go, and say, let's talk about this. Let's not escalate this confrontation. Let's find a way to negotiate this and come to some kind of an agreement. And we'll do that. We'll talk with you if you just don't announce the results of this study. So our government officials meet with China. We don't have any outcome yet. We'll negotiate for another 6 months. At the end of that period, there'll be some small escalation in the Chinese currency. They'll agree to have it float 3%, maybe 5%. I don't know. That's my projection. Okay? And they'll have a couple more years to continue manipulating their currency now at a rate of 35%, because they've agreed to a 3 to 5% increase, as opposed to the 40% that they've been enjoying for the last several years. They shouldn't have a 35% currency advantage. Okay? There are rules about this. They've agreed, when they became part of the World Trade Organization, to allow their currency to float. How many years ago was that? Okay? They blatantly break the rules that they agreed to that allowed them to become a trading partner of the world. And that's not right. And it's not right to say, well, we'll negotiate, we'll give them a little bit this time and a little bit more next time, and sooner or later, we'll have a level playing field. Well, at the rate of 5%, okay, every couple of years, when you start out with 40%, that's a long time. And it's enough time for them to put the American manufacturing sector out of business. And it is our job to make sure that we don't let that happen. And we need to make sure that we let every one of our political leaders, from the mayor who spoke today of the importance of manufacturing here in Cleveland, to our state officials, to our national officials, our leaders, they need to know that this is unacceptable. We are not asking for any advantages. We are not asking for any advantages. And I get so angry when I hear people say, well, we want to be protectionists. We're asking for a level playing field, nothing more. Now, virtually every person in this room is involved in manufacturing of some type, and I don't know all of your companies. But I'll ask you to think about this during the course of the day. You do know your companies. You know your business. You know your employees. You know your team. Okay? Ask yourself this question. Given a completely level playing field, are you confident that your company your team can succeed in international trade, that you can do it better on a level playing field than those in China, I can tell you this. I can't answer it for your companies, but I sure as heck can answer it for Nucor. And for Nucor, the answer is a resounding yes. We are confident. Given a level playing field, we will take on any competition anywhere in the world, and we will be successful. American manufacturing built this great country. Look around what we've done. Look at what we've accomplished. There is no way that I will ever believe that given what we've accomplished over the last 200 years, that given a level playing field, American manufacturing will not come out on top. I believe that with every fiber in my body. Long-winded answer to your question, but that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that our officials on the national level, the state level, and the local level understand that all we are asking for is a level playing field, and we are demanding, for the sake of our employees, that we get it. Thank you. Other questions? You're going to have to help me out here because I can't see out there in the audience. So, is there another question?
I've got a question over here. To your right.
Thank you. Okay.
You talked a lot about China. Who's the next China? Who's the next one in the pipe, as it were, in terms of competition and/or issues that are affecting us like China is?
The next, I would feel that the next major, well, there's two potential major areas of competition. One would be in India, where the population is very large and the economy is at a very low level that is growing rapidly. And the other is South America, because there's a lot of good natural resources located in South America. Now, I feel differently about competition from India and from South America, because they do apparently, at least now, they are playing on a level playing field. So I feel good about that competition. They're going to provide good competition. Good competition helps good companies get even better. So I'm looking forward to that type of competition. But those are two areas where I expect to see a large manufacturing base established. And for those reasons, large population, low-level economy that's growing rapidly in India, and in South America, they have a lot of natural resources in that country that will make them a good manufacturing competitor. But again, I want to stress, that's fine. We look forward to that competition. Good competition makes good companies into great companies. So we're looking forward to it, as long as they maintain their current practice of competing on a level playing field. Other questions? In the back? There you go, left-hand side.
I have a question. I'm way back here in the back, looking the other way.
Okay.
There you go. You're from steel, and of course Cleveland is a center of steel making. Question I have is, what does steel in particular need to do to pull out of this recession and then to be globally, to sustain its global competitiveness over the next 10, 20, 30 years?
What we need to do to be competitive over the next 10 to 15 years, okay, a lot of that we've already accomplished. We need to become more efficient. We need to become more energy efficient. We've done a lot of that work. Frankly, we also need to continue our current path on being environmental stewards. It's extremely important in every industry that we recognize the need to be environmentally compliant with regulations and to recognize the threat that manufacturing does provide to the environment. And therefore, we need to continue doing what we have done in the last 10 years and address those issues by significantly improving our carbon footprints. Going forward, we need to continue to focus on more efficient use of energy, more efficient use of our raw materials. I believe that we're doing that. And again, as I said earlier, I truly believe that we've done it to a level, and we will continue to do it at the level required to be successful in world competition. But those would be the areas that I would say steel and manufacturing in general need to focus on. efficiencies in our labor costs, in our energy costs, and in our environmental compliance, to stay focused on that, and the efficient use of our raw materials. Again, one of the best things I believe we can do, I'm speaking collectively to every person in this room, is to continue to encourage our government, to implore our government to give us a level playing field on which to compete. Once that happens, I believe we will compete successfully. Left-hand side, thank you.
Could you characterize just for a second some of the things that manufacturing did wrong? I mean, I realize that there are a lot of things, a lot of roadblocks that government policies have put on place to kind of slow down the growth of manufacturing in the United States. But what about the responsibility of manufacturers themselves? What's the difference between a good manufacturer and one that's just sort of hanging on? And
That's a great question. And boy, to have that question here asked at this conference, the answer is obvious. It comes in two words. What do you think they are? Continuous improvement. We took our eye off of the ball. Certainly, American manufacturing must bear some of the responsibility for what has taken place in the last 20 to 30 years. Listen, during the 50s and the 60s, life was good. We couldn't do anything wrong. We were heroes. We must have been really good at what we did because we were so successful. What happens when you lay back and say, boy, I'm really good at what I do. Look how successful I am. You ever play a game when you're a kid called King of the Mountain? What happens when you take a rest? Everyone tries to knock you off the top. There is no such thing as taking a rest, taking a breather in our businesses. We need to stay focused every day, stay challenged every day, okay? Dedicate ourselves to continuous improvement in every aspect of our businesses and our lives, our personal lives. I truly believe that. So what responsibility does manufacturing bear in the situation we have today? It's clear. We took our eye off the ball in the 60s, 70s. We were enjoying the good life, and we forgot what it was that got us to the position we were in. I was recently asked to speak at the college I graduated from, and asked to speak about leadership in a little bit different direction, and asked what I believed made Nucor successful as a company. And my first point was this: you work hard, then you work harder, and then you work harder still. And that's just another way of saying continuous improvement. Every day when you wake up, every day, you need to ask yourselves and your team, okay, what can we do just a little bit better today compared to what we did yesterday? One thing. Now, I would challenge everybody in this room, no matter how great your companies are. Nucor is a phenomenal company, great teammates, wonderful, efficient operations. But I guarantee you that every day we find a way of doing something a little bit better. Nucor has a no-layoff practice. I don't know how many of you are aware of that. And through this very, very challenging recession, we have not laid off a single employee, not one. Okay, we do not cut back hours. Now, the salaries get cut back because a large part of everyone's salary is bonus. And when the company does not produce high-quality steel safely, okay, when the tonnage that we produce goes down, then salaries go down. But everyone still worked. The reason I bring this up is because I'm often challenged by investors saying, is that a prudent policy to practice to follow? And I respond all the time, it absolutely is. I visit our mills on a very, very regular basis, our operations all over the United States. And every time I go, our teammates, the guys on the floor, are always anxious to pull me over to one part of the plant or the other to show me something they did different. How they replaced a 10-horsepower motor with a 7-horsepower motor, because that's all we really needed, and that saves $38 a month in energy costs. Small steps, but steps. Continuous improvement. If we challenge ourselves and we challenge our teams to start each day by asking, what can we do just a little bit better than we did yesterday? We will not repeat the mistakes that we've made in the past that got us into the position we are in today. So the short answer to your question, what did we do wrong? Do we bear some of the responsibility? We absolutely do bear some of the responsibility for the situation we are in today, and it was our failure to stay focused on continuous improvement. John Wayne talked about tomorrow, okay, and the value of being able to start each day fresh, new, comes into us clean, perfect, okay? Don't miss the opportunity to make tomorrow a little bit better than yesterday. That's the mistake we made. Let's not repeat it. Other questions? I don't see any. Oh, is that one there? Sir.
I just want to say thank you. I'm a steel company representative also, and so I admire your presentation. I'm curious how you feel that natural resources and coke and different commodities are going to play in the global economy and for Nucor's success and other companies' success. Scrap, you name it, everything that needs to make manufacturing run.
Great question. And every commodity, every raw material is going to be challenged and continue to be challenged as we go forward. The world population continues to grow. Okay, we talked about China, and the growth rate that they've had in steel. In the last 5 years, they've gone from producing about 100 million tons of steel a year to over 500 million tons of steel a year. And you mentioned specifically scrap, and that's a subject that's near and dear to Nucor, being an electric arc furnace-based company. We use scrap as a primary raw material. Let me give you a little bit of some statistics on scrap. 5 years ago, the United States exported about 6 million tons of scrap every year, and that number had been consistent for almost 20 years. Last year, we exported 24 million tons, 4 times the amount. In a 5-year period, the amount of a critical raw material to this nation has left the United States, has increased 4 times, 4-fold. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, the demand for the commodity has gone up. So what do we do about that? That's why I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges of all manufacturers is to continue to improve the efficiency and use of critical raw materials. Scrap being one, iron ore being another, okay, energy being another, okay? All of those commodities are going to increase in cost as we go forward. I don't see that letting up. Certainly not in the next 10 years. So what does Nucor need to do? What do all of you need to do in that environment? Continue to focus on continuously improving the way that you use those raw materials. Make every penny that you spend on those raw materials count. Become more efficient in every aspect of your consumption of your critical raw materials. I might point out one thing. I don't want to beat this trade thing to death, but I do want to point out, since scrap came up, okay, one of the key reasons that the amount of scrap leaving the United States has increased so much in the last several years is that many other countries have now put a tax on the exportation of scrap to such a level that it is no longer economically viable to export scrap. Classic example is the Ukraine and Russia. Russia used to export about 8 million tons of scrap a year. The Ukraine, a little bit less, somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 million tons. Both of those countries now have declared scrap a strategic resource. And in some cases, during certain periods of time, they've banned it. In other periods of time, they've just taxed it. Both had the effect of reducing the amount of scrap that left those countries. Now, the United States does not do that, and I'm not advocating that we do. Okay, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating we do. But I am advocating that our government holds those countries that do that accountable for that in our trade agreements. So, coming back to your question, what do I see happening with commodities? Pricing is going to continue to increase. Their availability is going to become more challenged, and we have to continue to find better and better ways to use a scarcer raw material. Other questions?
I have a question for you. You mentioned Nucor's no layoff policy. Can you talk about some of the steps Nucor has taken during the economic downturn to manage costs?
Well, I can in a general sense, but first I need to make sure that I correct you on one point. It is not a no layoff policy. It is a no layoff practice. And it's a practice that we've been able to do since the company's formation in 1968. Now, there's an important distinction between those two words of practice and policy. Policy means it's a rule, and it will always be done. A practice means that our teammates have enabled us to do it, and currently continue to enable us to do it. And they do that, okay, by bringing those levels of efficiency during those periods of downturn, finding those ways to do things better, continuously improving our operations, which in turn reduces our cost structure, allows us to make the kind of profits we need, even in the very challenging times, to keep everyone working. So I just wanted to clarify that. We do not have a no layoff policy. It's not a rule, okay? It's a practice. And it's a practice that our teammates themselves allow us to continue through their work and their efforts on continuous improvement. Okay. Now, in general senses, I'm not going to get specific on what Nucor has done to reduce costs, but in a general sense, I'll make this comment. We believe in our teammates. We have a very simple management philosophy. In fact, I always joke that when I retire, I'm going to write a book about Nucor's management techniques. It's going to be an extremely short book, okay, because there's really only 4 steps that we believe are necessary for effective management. First step, you hire the right people. And Nucor has an extremely extensive and challenging employment criteria. So you hire the right people. You make absolutely certain that they clearly understand what you want them to accomplish. You make sure that they have you make sure that they have all of the tools and resources they need to accomplish what you want them to accomplish. And that could mean training, that could mean physical tools, could mean computers, whatever. So you hire the right people, you make sure they clearly understand what it is you want them to accomplish, you make sure they have the tools and the resources needed to accomplish it, and the 4th step is absolutely the most critical. You get the hell out of their way. Because if you hired the right person, they know what you want them to do, they have everything they need to do it, they are going to do it. And all you're going to do is slow them down. That's what Nucor has done over the last 30 years, okay, to reduce our costs and keep our company as profitable as we have been over that period.
In terms of leveraging the politicians, are there any lobbying groups that you would recommend that we join in terms of professional organizations or anything like that? Because I don't see the numbers or the voices yelling your message. And it's going to take the voice of the masses to do that.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're absolutely right. And all I can say is at Nucor, the entire team's doing everything we can to get that message out there. Our CEO and Chairman Dan D'Amico does an absolutely outstanding job of making sure that every opportunity he has, he gets that message out there. And I do see some signs that people are starting to get the message. If you look over the last 2 months, the Wall Street Journal has had a few articles about the importance of job creation and the manufacturing sector to the success of the economy in the United States. You never saw that a year ago. You didn't see that 6 months ago. The New York Times, the Washington Post have been doing the same. Nucor runs ads. We just ran one in Wall Street Journal last month, specifically addressing this issue. Okay. In terms of specific organizations, there's many, many out there. You have the AISI, American Iron and Steel Institute. You have the World Steel Organization. You have there's several out there. And frankly, you don't need to be part of a big organization to have an impact on change. I want to stress this, because if you, with your teams, okay, get to the local politicians, it's hard to express just how much power you have. We all need to remember I believe the mayor has left the room, and I hope he has, okay? But there's only the number one priority of every politician, the minute they get elected, or let me rephrase that, the number one priority of most politicians, probably the vast majority of politicians, okay, their number one priority as soon as they are elected is to do what? To get reelected. And they listen to what's important. Now, we never tell our employees what to do. We don't tell them how to vote. We don't tell them which issues to support. But we do tell them, support what you believe in. Know the facts. Know the issues. And be involved. Be involved by writing your congressman, sending an email, making a phone call. And I can tell you how effective it is. We recently had an issue that truly threatened the steel industry, and we made all of our employees aware of it. Again, I want to stress, we don't tell them to write a letter. We don't tell them to send an email. We don't tell them to send a fax. But we make sure that they are aware of the facts and make their own decision on what to do. On this particular issue, okay, we sent out an email informing everyone what was going on, giving them all sides of the issue, asking them to sit down, think about this issue, and get involved on this issue. The next morning, we got a call from just about every local politician in every community where our mills were located saying, hey guys, I can't keep paper in my fax machine. I can't even open my emails anymore. My point is this. You can have an impact with your teams. Support organizations, that's fine. Get into action groups, that's fine. But encourage your teammates, all of your teammates, to be involved. That goes a long way in making a change. You know, at Nucor is spelled N-U-C-O-R, and I'm often asked, what does Nucor stand for? And I respond, it's nephews, uncles, cousins, and other relatives. Okay? Because we're located in very small communities, so our company truly is a corporate family. And whenever I say that, I say when we have these issues and you want to make an impact with a local politician, remember what Nucor stands for. And don't just contact him yourself. Get your nephew, your uncle, your cousin, and your other relatives to contact them also. You'd be amazed at how many people you can muster on an issue. Do it. Be active. Understand the issues and make sure the politicians at every level know where you stand on those issues. Other questions?
Yeah, here we go, John. I'm Jeff Garner. I am responsible for global manufacturing for Biorad, which is a biotechnology company that everybody seems to think is the future of America. But our industry outsources just as much as anybody else's does. And we outsource when we get lower cost. We outsource because the effective tax rate in the U.S. is uncompetitive with almost any other country in the world. And we outsource for talent, okay? So and I agree, the playing field is not level. It's not level, and the people that are most responsible are our politicians. And I agree that we should be putting pressure on them. But I guess my question is, why aren't they here now? I spend about 5 times as much of my time with politicians from other countries as I do with politicians in the U.S. Politicians in other countries know that part of their job is to sell their country. And I appreciate the mayor of Cleveland joining us for all 5 minutes that he was here. But that's not enough. Why isn't Industry Week inviting the politicians to show up and give us some presentations about what they're doing to level the playing field? Doesn't that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I wish I could answer your question, but I can't. I can tell you that I spend not nearly as much time in Washington on these issues as Mr. D'Amico, but I spend enough time there to know that it is very difficult to get politicians to understand the most basic elements. And well, I could probably get in a lot of trouble if I shared this following thought with you, but I will, okay? When I'm asked why is that, I give this answer. You know, you often hear of the United States that we have a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And I think a lot about what does that mean? Where did that come from? And if you're a history buff, as I am, you'll know that at the beginning, the early days, the early decades of our country, politicians were people who were professionals, worked in industry, lawyers, doctors, worked in manufacturing, who made a conscious decision to leave their careers, to leave their profession for a given period of time to serve their country in government. So you would have a manufacturing executive who worked 20 years in industry, decided he needed to do something for his country, would leave that industry, serve for 4, 6, or maybe 8 years in government, and then leave and go back to his industry or his profession, okay, or his job, okay, producing, farming, whatever it was that he did. What that resulted in was truly a government of our people, okay? They understood the issues. They lived the issues. They knew what it was like to have a devastating crop. They knew what it was like to be in manufacturing and live through a terrible recession. They understood that. They knew that. Today, you know, we hear of the political career. People go into politics as a career. That is not how our country was started. And I personally believe that that's one of the reasons that it's so difficult to get politicians today, our leaders today, to understand the issues, because they haven't lived the issues. Someone who goes to college, goes to law school, and I'm not negative on that, and goes into politics and stays there for 30 years, do they really understand what's happening out on your plant floor? Do they really understand the impact of you? Clearly a guy who's concerned about America and America's future. I can tell that in your voice, okay? The fact that you have to outsource overseas. You're not happy about that. If he lived in your world and understood that, the chances are that he would take more aggressive action to fix it. Now, I want to be very clear, that's my opinion. It is not the opinion of Nucor Steel, okay? All right? That's my personal opinion. I believe that this country was founded by people. Think of George Washington. What did George Washington do? Do you know how hard it was for people to convince him? And at one point, they wanted to name him president for life. Are you aware of that? You ever read about George Washington? He told them, if that law gets passed, I will leave Washington today. Because he understood how important it was to have a government of the people. And you cannot have a government of the people when your government leaders are not from the people. They don't understand the issues. They haven't lived the issues. Now, that's my personal opinion. Any other questions before they caught me off to jail? Okay. I hope I make it out of Cleveland alive here now. Do I see another question? Okay.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a follow-up to the initial question, kind of tie into the biolab question around, you know, what could our politicians be doing? And it's sort of a question and sort of a challenge, which is, at least it seems to me that, you know, the discussion so far has been relatively one-sided in the sense that, you know, we keep saying, why don't the politicians just level the playing field, more or less? And with all of the currency flows and so forth, there's a flip side to that, which is that we have the capital flows, and that's led to our low interest rates and the demand for our treasuries and so forth, and it's allowed the government to run and to continue to run tremendous deficits, which, if you're a politician and if you want to be elected again, deficits can be useful to boost spending. And I guess I would sort of suggest and ask for your comment that that may be one of the reasons why our administration has been reluctant to pressure China and to really put their foot down, as you said, as a currency manipulator. Be curious to hear your response.
I absolutely agree. You know, it's kind of this syndrome of not on my shift, not on my watch, okay? You know, yes, we recognize that long term, the short-term decisions we are making, long term, will be very, very harmful. But I'll get through my term. I'll get through my 2 years. I'll get through my 4 years. I don't want this to happen on my shift. I don't want to have to make the tough decisions, the tough long-term decisions that this country is going to have to make. You know, you referenced deficit spending. All right, listen. All right, I'm not an economist. I'm not a financial guy. I'm an engineer. I started as an electrician in this industry. So I might not understand all of this high finance stuff, but I'll tell you this, one thing I do understand. You cannot continue to spend more than you bring in. It doesn't work with governments, it doesn't work with companies, and it doesn't work in families. Okay? Long term, continuing to spend more than you make, in any sense, your revenue, is a bad decision. That is common sense. You don't have to have a degree from Yale University to understand that. And yet we continue to do it. Why? I cannot accept that our leaders in this country do not understand that. I cannot accept that. And I personally believe it's a case of, as I've said, I don't want to address it on my term. I need to get through my 4 years. We see it on both sides of the aisle. This isn't a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. This is a universal issue in our leadership. We need people in there who are no longer, and I hate to go back to the presentation, and I realize that John Wayne was only an actor. If you watch some of his films, some of the things he says make a lot of sense. Sooner or later, we know we got a problem. You know, it always looks worse than it is when you get up in its face and recognize it for what it is. But you've got to address it. Got to address it. And sooner or later, we've got to address those issues. Now, I'm watching the clock here, and I know that we're out of time, so I wanted to just close again by saying thank you very, very much for inviting me here to speak today. I believe very strongly in continuous improvement, and it was an honor to be invited to speak to this conference that is dedicated to continuous improvement. Thank you very much.